Many people I'm sure heard Robin Williams died earlier this afternoon, or this morning. I think it was a suicide. And his wife said very nicely, let's remember what he gave us, not how he left. But the simple thing to keep in mind is everybody's just trying to get through the day. Everyone's just trying to get through the night. And you have to figure out how you're going to deal with your energetic currents. And there's no one who can do that for you. And there's no external resource that's going to supply that. And it doesn't matter what strata of society you're at. You just have to figure out how you're going to arrange the movement of your psyche through time and space. And we do have teachings now that will give anyone a better chance to do that. I know we still live in a world where addiction, alcohol, drug abuse is common, and depression is considered just something you can fall into and not get out of. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't need to be that way. And we're trying to create a planet where people don't have to die before their time, is that they can use these techniques. And Kundalini Yoga has a lot to offer to that debate. It's not the only answer by any means, but it certainly has a lot to offer. We'll do tonight that addiction meditation, which we've gone over many, many times. If some outside behavior or some outside substance or some outside, what would you call it, repetitive, destructive pattern keeps presenting itself, it's because I'm inside trying to figure out how to balance myself, how to get comfortable with myself. That's how I got into the behavior in the first place. So the inward desire is a good one. Essentially, how do I get through the day? How do I get through the night? But if I'm interlocked with something that's destroying me, then I have to undo that interlock. And one technique that's very, very effective is this addiction meditation, which will essentially disconnect the connection I have with the behavior or substance that's destroying me. And, this is the key part, and redirect my psyche in a more productive direction. Because it's not enough to get yourself out of a hole. You can't spend the rest of your life looking at the hole. That's not a good life. You got to get going another way. And for that you need energy. And you've got to get something in the system that's going to propel you in a different way. And we see a lot of it in this society, people circling back to problematic patterns. They get out of them, but then they can't quite break it, and years later, they'll come back, or months later, and sometimes 20 years later, all of a sudden they're back in the exact same places because they never got something installed in the system that had a momentum. And we think of it like you have an energetic field that is moving, constantly moving and fluctuating, but you can grow it to a certain size where it won't go back to the destructive size. But you have to maintain it. And little doses, consistent doses of Kundalini Yoga. Kundalini Yoga, if you practice it 5 minutes a day, that's better than practicing for 1 hour a week. We know this? Just a consistent dose is a consistent message to my system to go in a better direction. And Robin Williams was someone who's, a long time ago, Alan King was a comedian. And he said, I've been in the business, I've made my living in the business for over 30 years now. And he said, Robin Williams is in a different profession. He's doing something completely different. Because Robin Williams' neurology was moving at a kind of lightning speed. And his ability to kind of associate across the spectrum was unprecedented, really. Although he learned a lot, if you enjoy researching those things, Jonathan Winters, who also had some, by societal standards, mental instability, but his ability to kind of associate across wide spectrums of data and make quick, penetrating, perspective-shifting observations was genius, really. But that requires a certain, what would you say, energetic movement through the being that requires a higher level of maintenance. You can't maintain a Ferrari the same way you maintain a, what are those things all the nice people drive? Prius. But it has to start from an orientation. This is the machine I'm driving, and I have to be honest about what it is, and then respectful of what kind of care it needs. And what you have to do, and we're now giving birth to great numbers of these children who have these higher levels of sensitivity, who have these quicker minds. And in an information age, you're able to zoom across the whole kind of data landscape rapidly. So you have children who were able to make Google-type searches that was unheard of, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So these children require a different level of care and maintenance than previous generations that were moving at a slower pace. So this is where this technology comes in. And we think Kundalini Yoga is a technology. Out of the technology, you can find spiritual paths, you can find a religion, you can find a lifestyle, you can find a community, you can find all those things, but essentially it grows out of the technology, and it's how to use the technology. And the technology begins with you, your breath, and how you're directing your system. And if you direct your system with mantra, that's an innately sophisticated, intelligent, directional system. So if I put the mantra in, it will move me to a place where I don't need to keep circling back. And I circle back. Why do I circle back? Because there's a magnetic pull of the memory to go back somewhere. And I haven't demagnetized that memory landscape. So the magnetic pull to go back to the behavioral patterns. Because what's one kind of very deceptively a warning note everyone should be aware of. When a memory pulls me back into some destructive direction, what's one major component of it? Amnesia. It's going to be editing out all the reasons I got out of that behavior in the first place. So we have to understand the structure of these magnetic forces. And if you get yourself caught in some kind of grief pattern or some kind of depression pattern, what's one major component of that thought form? It's just a location. It's no different than walking through, exit through the gift shop, right? You've got to get out of the place. You're going to go through that room. So if you go through the room called depression, what's one major component of that room? There's a signal that comes into your whole body-mind system that says, this will never end. You have to know that that's false before you go into the room. Because it's false, it's a condition of that space. It's not a condition of anything. And what keeps you moving, again, if I have something moving through me, we'll do that again tonight, sa, ta, na, ma. It has an intelligent momentum, an intelligent force that tells me to disregard those type of signals. So I have to put something in the body, mind, that's going to tell me disregard that. It's not relevant data. It's perfectly normal to get depressed. It's perfectly normal to get addicted to things. It's perfectly normal to get caught in a grief space. But what you got to do is you got to move through it. And you're going to move through it if you're aware that part of the traps I need to avoid is this is never going to end. And why do we want the comedians on the planet? Because if I get a laugh, all of a sudden I've added energy to the system, and I have a little moment where I can see it from a different point of view, or I can see something from a different point of view. The multiple perspective is critical, because when I get caught in a bad place, I've got to see it from multiple perspectives and start to look for multiple opportunities to exit. But there has to be a kind of key momentum, and we're trying to train people, teach people who can teach other people of these techniques, these teachings, so we can kind of elevate the whole collective humanity where we don't need to have people get lost in these spaces. It doesn't need to happen. You'll do a big course of it. Well, it's a chronic depression, fighting, Right? First of all, fighting, this is a common headline now, fighting depression. How about moving through it? Why do you want to sit and fight with the drunk guy outside the curb? Why don't you just exit through the back and leave him alone? But the language itself traps you. And there should be just a normal acceptance. Everyone's going to go through those phases. Through the spaces. And some people are going to go through them slower than others, and some people are going to move through them in a kind of, what do we call it, less than direct way. But everyone is moving through it. If there's a notion, and you encounter anyone in your life, or you're happening to you, you have to be very attentive to how you're talking about it. I'm grieving for a while. That, for a while, that little phrase puts a limit on it. I was depressed back then for a while. All of a sudden, you can't, that for a while cancels out forever. I was born depressed. And it ticks me off. It doesn't work that way. You've got to think about moving through it. And if that notion's there that we're moving through something, and I got into the alcohol and drugs during that phase of it, during that section of the road, and then I found another way to keep moving through it. See, the whole notion is that I'm moving on. Alert to the fact that part of the component of the space is that you're now in it forever. But watch the media now. The media with these places are permanent residences. They're not. It's just a condition that's blowing through, and I don't need to get caught in it. But we have to find people who've navigated out, so you can help other people navigate out. And the first way to navigate out is accept, it's a logical premise, isn't it? That everything's temporary. Now, one thing, if I was depressed as a small boy, the shoes I put on as a small boy, even if I want to, I can't fit into them anymore because my feet grew. And I can grow my aura so it simply won't fit back in those depressed spaces. But I have to have some consistent application of some energy-enhancing technique that's got me increasing my strength, increasing my energy with a directional momentum. So think, directional momentum. And it has nothing to do with getting caught in one of these spaces. That can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter how you got there. It just matters how you're moving through it. And if we lock into that notion, that's one major helping orientation to keep going. And Yogi Bhajan had a simple mantra. He said, just keep up. Keep practicing, and you'll find yourself in a consistently better place, but that will be constantly changing. Constantly changing. So, what we want to do is, and that's what we'll talk about with the women this weekend, create psyches that have that as a core basic operating system. So that you can encounter somebody and your very presence will give them the hope of moving on, the hope of momentum, the hope of changing. Good? So everyone's making their own effort to add to the collective well-being. And when you have a being of Robin Williams' stature who helped countless people for countless years and will visit the recordings well into the future. When Steven Spielberg was filming Schindler's List, which he was going as deep into that whole Holocaust, I think, as anyone filmmaker has ever done. A couple of times a week, he had Robin Williams call him just to keep him from getting depressed by it. So, we'll do a call and send Robin Williams on his way and see what we can do to help the collective not get caught in this trap.